Hey guys, it's Claudia here. Just a quick disclaimer. Some of you may have noticed the scratchy scratchy noises in the background of some of our episodes. No, you are not imagining things. We currently share a recording room with my 4 ferrets, and apparently they very much want to be involved in the podcast process. So really sorry about that, but shout out to Busby, Lilith, Peach and Truffle, makers of the scratchy scratchy noises. Sorry guys, thanks.
What's up, witches?
I'm Claudia.
And I'm Jess.
And welcome back to True Crime Coven. This week we've got ghost stories.
Yeah, excited to bring you some more ghost stories.
Woo, or should I say boo? God, that was bad. I'm so sorry. I'll see myself out of my own house.
So, should we just get straight into it? The first story we have today was sent in by the lovely Leah. This is actually my grandmother's story, but through her sharing with my mum and now with me, it's given me a very different view of ghosts and the afterlife altogether. My grandmother grew up in the Caribbean, and she grew up in a small country called Guyana, which borders Brazil. Now, a lot of these countries share the same beliefs when it comes to the afterlife, including the Day of the Dead and all things ghosts. Guyana was colonised in the 1500s, and you can tell where the Christian beliefs have been integrated with the indigenous beliefs. Most people believe in some sort of heaven, hell, and purgatory, and this can be very different depending on who you talk to, but that's pretty much what all of their beliefs are kind of based on. Sometimes different names, slightly different beliefs around it, but there is a good place, a bad place, and a place in the middle. A lot of Caribbean people also believe in Jumbees, and these beliefs all range as well, so they range from anything meaning a good ghost to a demonic spirit. It's basically a blanket term for ghosts, ghouls, shapeshifters, and creatures of the night. I kind of thought of it as the British word for spirit. So basically just anything to describe an entity that is present in the world, but it's neither living or dead. So my grandmother grew up in New Amsterdam, and here they believed the Jumbees were trapped spirits, or basically were the people who were in purgatory. They weren't necessarily bad spirits, but they were trapped on earth until their sins were repaid or they were ready to move along to heaven or hell. The next part of the story is something my grandmother swears she has seen happen herself, and something that I've never seen but I would love to see. Once a year, all the trapped Jumbees rise from the ground and begin the journey to the river. It's kind of more of a marshland, but everyone refers to it as the river. Once they finally reach the river, they would begin their swim, or what is known as their ascent to heaven. Again, all called different things depending on who you speak to, but they would disappear from view. Also, on a random note that I've put at the bottom, so Leah actually recorded herself telling this story and then sent it for me to type up. And halfway through, when she was explaining what the Jumbee was, her door just randomly closed behind her. Which was fun.
Did she have a window open or anything?
She didn't say, but she jumped and was like, "Oh, what was that?" And then she was like, "Oh, it was my door." So yeah.
I mean, I'll put my skeptical hat on for that.
It could have happened at any time of the day, and it just had to nicely happen when she was telling me her story about the trapped spirits on Earth. So yeah, that was a little bit of a ghost story, but also a little bit educational about...
Yeah, I like their name for ghosts.
Yeah, Jumbee.
Jumbee, it's very cute.
Yeah. If you want to look at it more, I did Google what Jumbee are just to make sure that I did have the correct definition, and there is so much on it. There's and all the Caribbean.
We can do an episode on Jumbee.
Yeah, but I think it was amazing how much it did range, because there was there's some cultures that believe they are just evil spirits, there's some cultures that believe they're all spirits. It was nice to get a little bit of a different view on ghosts.
Yeah, I mean, seeing them all rise up is a bit like, oh hell no.
Yeah, I mean, it would be cool to watch, especially if you knew they're not there to harm you. They're just there to oh look, I've repaid my sins, I'm off to heaven or hell.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you've got any stories on Jumbees...
Yeah, let us know.
I also definitely kind of want to call a cat Jumbee.
I know someone who called their cat Satan so that they could shout, "Not today, Satan," at their cat. But I'm like, real fun when you got to call it back in and you're like, Satan, come here, Satan.
Satan's a cute name for
It
a
is.
cat.
Imagine it for a dog and you're just running around the park going, Satan.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard worse dog names.
Oh, yeah. So the one I've got next isn't a ghost story. So I've gone for a slightly different angle. And because we call ourselves a coven, I thought I would talk about witches. Although this is kind of history, I'm not 100% sure on all of the details. So I'm going to kind of say it's a story rather than it's factually correct. So don't come at me if it's not all correct. This is what I found online and what I found out when I went to Scotland. Obviously, went to Scotland and heard this story, thought it was really interesting, thought I'd bring it back. Before I get going, if I said to you, picture a witch in your head, what do you?
Well, it's like the pointy hat, the nose of the boar, the ragged clothes. For some reason, green is still like very much in my vision.
Yeah, and broomstick, normally a cat or something, or some sort of familiar with them. Obviously, there's so much on the internet about witches, and I don't want to go into loads of detail because I want to go
Glastonbury's got loads of stuff about witches.
Oh, really? But basically, I wanted to focus on specifically this story because it's one of the theories as to why witches look the way they do.
Okay.
So obviously, if you look at like the Salem witch trials, they don't look like traditional witches in like the portraits of what they looked like. So where did this Halloween image come from?
The haggy.
Yeah, the hag, yeah. Again, there's many different theories around this, but this is one that I recently learnt about, so I just thought I'd come and share it with everyone.
Oh, do tell.
Do tell. Okay. So from everything I read about on the internet about this, and there is loads out there if you want to do your own research, then it is a very well-known story. But historically, women brewed beer.
Oh.
And again, I don't want to go into the long history of beer brewing, but basically, even like all the way back in like ancient China, the Babylons, Egyptians, Romans, Norse history, everything has women brewing beer. Like, it was never a man's role, it was always the role of the women. And like to the point where there were like big goddesses and women were actively encouraged to work in taverns. And I even found something that said Cleopatra actually imposed a tax on beer because it was so common, like, and it was one of the first recorded taxes for alcohol. So yeah,
I think I might have found what I was in a past life, a beer goddess.
big goddess.
Explains my belly.
Obviously, beer was also used for religious ceremonies, and so it was quite often brewed by the nuns. And I think, from what I managed to read, I believe it was actually a nun who came up with the idea to add hops to beer because it added medicinal element. But then obviously people found that it tastes better with hops, so they kept doing it, which isn't really relevant to the story of witches, but I just thought it was a nice little side note. But basically, just to emphasize the point that it was always a woman's role. Again, from what I've read, I gather it came from, obviously, traditionally in history, men were the hunters, women were the gatherers.
Okay.
And obviously the ingredients for beer were what you gathered rather than hunted, and then they would obviously take it back to the kitchen, brew the beer along with making the food, and it was just something that people would make for like even their children because it was a good source of protein and carbohydrates, and it was cheap. So you think,
and obviously clean water wasn't really a thing.
So a lot of people did just drink beer or had it in their diet, and a lot of families would make it for themselves, like their own family, but then anything left over they would sell for petty cash.
Okay.
And then that's kind of what started the brewing and selling because it became more popular, and then people actually started brewing beer to sell, and they were called alewives, and they would take it to marketplaces and sell. And it was almost a way for like unmarried women who had, or widows as well, to just make a little bit of money to get by in life. But this is also in a time where women had no rights.
Yeah.
Even if you were married, you didn't have any economic or legal standing in the world. You were your husband's property at the end of the day. So if you wanted to be registered as a brewer and you were married, it was your husband that was registered.
Ugh.
Even though the wives did everything, the husband was just the one who owned the business. And if you were not married, you just kind of did it at the marketplaces on the sly, just to get money. Pretty hard time to be a woman. So even in their prime of beer making, when it was like quite a profitable job for women, they were still financially and politically very vulnerable. So if you went to a marketplace and you wanted to find an alewife, they had a very specific look. They wore tall pointed black hats so that they could stand out. They carried cauldrons to brew the beer in. They used broomsticks to sweep up the mess they made from brewing, and they would sometimes use the broomstick above the door of the tavern or the market, wherever they were selling, just to say, like, we have stock, take it down when they ran out of beer.
Okay.
And they would often have cats, because obviously they were working with barley and rye, attracted lots of mice, and would keep cats to keep them away. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure where the green, wart-nosed, crooked-nosed look comes from.
I imagine it was. I could very much imagine it might be like a demonization of like an independent woman.
Yeah, definitely. And as we get more into the story, you kind of realise why. So in the 16th century, the Reformation had begun, and the fundamentalist religious movement wanted stricter gender norms. They wanted men's. Yeah, this is a man's role, this is a woman's role. So this was also about the time that they condemned witchcraft, obviously, and being found guilty of a witch was punishable by death. And also at this time, so there's a lot happening, there was, like, the population was increasing, so obviously poverty was increasing.
Yeah.
So life was just getting harder for everyone. So as the process of brewing beer took a lot of time, you had to be very dedicated, and obviously it was quite a physical job. Like, you had to clean up after yourself, you had to sweep the floors, carry all the bundles of rye and grain, and they were quite heavy. And men did brew beer as well, but it was predominantly done by women at this point. And the male brewers, obviously, they had more of a political and economical standing, and they thought, here is our opportunity to take over this business and take this business away from women. So they started telling everyone that it should be a masculine role. It's a very physical job. This is a man's job. You have to carry heavy things. It's a man's job. It's not a woman's job. Women should be at home looking after the children, not spending hours brewing beer and spending hours in the marketplace. So some people were jumping on that idea that it should be a man's job, but it wasn't stopping the women, and it wasn't stopping the popularity of the alewives. So to stop people buying from them, they started accusing the women of being witches. Of course. They said, don't buy their beer because they're using the cauldrons to brew magic potions that will kill you instead of beer. In some places, it actually got so out of hand that it became illegal for women to sell beer. Obviously, if your husband was the one who owned the business, you could kind of get away with still helping him brew the beer, but he would be the owner and the seller of the beer. But obviously, a lot of the alewives were unmarried, widowed women, because it was the only thing that they could do.
Men on power trips more.
Yeah, also you think widows tend to be a bit older, live alone.
And you get like the whole, like, if a man's older and not married, he's a bachelor.
Yeah.
Woman is a spinster.
Yes. Yeah. So you've got all this, like, and people are very susceptible to, like, these ideas.
Yeah.
Like, they believe everything they hear, kind of. So they're struggling, poverty's increasing, their trade is being masculinized, they're being told that they can't sell beer, and they're being accused of being witches. And that's not just being like, oh yeah, she's a witch. It's like, oh, she's a witch, let's take her to trial and kill her.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing, these poor women. So yeah, basically it was kind of a lose-lose. If you didn't have a husband and you were making decent money in a struggling community, there's something suspicious there, you're a witch.
Yeah.
Obviously, this isn't the only reason for the modern day witches, as I said earlier, but it's hard to tell as well if these women were being put on trial for selling beer or if it was their social standing. So you think a lot of the people that were put on trial were just of lower classes anyway, because they didn't have the money to help themselves. So it's hard to say like, oh, all the people who were accused of being witches were alewives. They were selling beer. But there is definitely a clear correlation between women who were accused of witchcraft and women who were alewives. But again, that was just supporting the rumours that it was a way men were pushing women out of a job.
Yeah.
Also, another random fact that I found, that is 90% of all people put on trial for being a witch were female.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm actually surprised not just 100%.
Yeah, there were some places, they had it down as like different parts of the UK, and there were like 2 or 3 places in the UK where it's 95 to 99%.
Yeah.
But you also think some of these alewives that were being accused of being witches also had husbands doing the same job, and they weren't being accused of being witches either.
Yeah.
So.
It was just like a purely sexist thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I just thought it was a bit mad to think that literally for centuries women have dominated the beer trade. But whereas you look now, I found another statistic as well, that the top 10 beer companies in the world are all owned by men and have like predominantly male like CEO, staffing, like it's very few women in management roles.
Well, it's like if you look at like advertising for any sort of beer,
it's very
it'll always be
men.
like a beer being brought to like a man.
Yeah. Or like men watching sports.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I want
it's
one
still
where
very...
a beer, a nice ice cold beer is brought to a woman.
Yeah.
That's what I
it's
want.
still very gender stereotyped, isn't it?
Men like beer and women like wine and cocktails.
I mean, I do like wine and cocktails.
But I like beer too.
But I like beer too, yeah. And also, my husband likes wine and cocktails.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not, yeah, it should go both ways. So yeah, that is the end of my story.
Oh,
It
well.
was just something a bit different, something a bit interesting.
What if you're familiar as a mouse?
It will probably know not to eat all your barley and rye.
True.
Yeah.
But mouse do be micing.
If you had a familiar, what do you think it would be?
Well, I always say Karen's my familiar.
Yeah, Delhi's mine.
But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, probably. I'd still go cat. I mean, I do have a black cat.
Yeah.
It's very stereotypical.
Yeah, Karen's a good little familiar though. She's great and fluffy.
Yeah. Delhi hates people. She
Yeah.
just hates them all.
Well,
she
I
doesn't
mean, she's-
stereotype, she hates everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just good practice, really.
Just cats, yeah. Don't trust anyone.
I believe you have one more story.
I have one more story, and I am actually going to have a bit of a trigger warning with this one, because even when I was writing it out, I was like, oh, this is creepy. So it's actually sent in to me by one of my friends, Shani, and this is her mum's story. My mum used to take my brother to hospital for chemotherapy treatment back in the 80s. And one visit, they found a doll in the waiting area. My mum took a real liking to this doll, but thought she'd better hand it in as someone's probably missing it. So she went to reception and tried to hand it in, but the receptionist said that she'd been trying to find the owner for weeks with no luck. She states she thinks it sadly might have belonged to a terminally ill child and assumed the worst had happened. And she thought the parents probably couldn't bring themselves to take it back home with them. The receptionist said she thought it was a very popular doll, as she often came in and found it in different places when she came into work, as lots of children used to like playing with it. But she said if my mum and my brother had taken a real fancy to it, then we were welcome to take it home with us, as they had a lot of toys there. So she decided to take the doll home with her, and slowly things started getting creepy. They would hear strange noises, and they were unable to find a source. And sometimes some of these noises were loud bangs, even if all the doors in the house were closed. Then they started seeing things. They would often see a little girl at the top of the stairs before they were about to climb the staircase. She never did anything sinister, but everyone who came to the house saw her on multiple occasions. And she was mostly at the top of the stairs, but sometimes she was seen at different locations depending on where the doll was. She was clearly linked to the doll. One day, my brother needed to go into the loft to collect something, and as he was climbing up into the darkness, he felt strange, as if something was there with him. He quickly reached for the light and saw a scary, demonic face. Obviously, he was terrified and ran straight downstairs to find my parents and refused to go anywhere near the loft again. My parents did go back up after him, but they never found anything. From this point, things escalated and the loud banging noises were more frequent. Doors were being slammed and things would often be moved around the house. and the girl would be seen on a daily basis. All the occurrences would be happening in the day as well as the night, and things got so bad they eventually decided to call in a spiritualist. They came to assess the house, they blessed it, and they confirmed their suspicions. Everything that was happening was linked to the doll. She told them to burn the doll, which they did, and as soon as they did it, everything stopped, and they've never seen the little girl again.
Ugh.
Creepy, right?
Little girl ghosts are creepy.
Also dolls.
Yeah, dolls.
Really creepy.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I had these China dolls as a kid.
Yeah.
Because when you're like a really little kid, for some reason I feel like you're not scared of them, and then like as you get older they get creepier.
Yeah.
And I had these 3 China dolls, and I didn't want them anymore because I was scared of them. I was about 11.
Yeah.
But I'd heard that story about when that person throws away their doll and they come back, and it's like, I'm on the first step. So then I couldn't throw this doll away.
Yeah, you've got to just keep it.
And I was so scared of them that I used to like say goodnight to them every night, because I was just like, I have to respect these dolls, man, otherwise they're going to get me.
Well, I just find it funny how at some point her mum and her brother both felt a connection to this doll. Like, they both felt like they needed to take it home, and obviously the receptionist just assumed that people were playing with the doll, and that's why it was moving around. Also, like, it was at a children's hospital. Obviously he was being treated for cancer, and they're assuming this girl died of cancer, but who's to say she wasn't possessed?
Yeah, I mean, I loved dolls as a kid. I still to this day like love Barbies. If I see a baby Annabelle or something, I'm like, oh, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something very creepy about dolls that, like, I feel like isn't instilled in us. And it's so weird because they shouldn't be creepy. They are literally like...
A children's toy.
Well, yeah, but also they're meant to look like babies.
Yeah. I remember getting a China doll, and it was called a Jessica doll. And that's why it got bought for me, because it was supposed to be a Jessica doll. Also, the burning thing. I thought if you burnt something that had a spirit connected to it, the spirit just moved on into something else.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, I don't know if there's rules.
No.
Because we don't know if it definitely all exists.
No. I mean, I guess if you've called a spiritualist in, they know more than me. So.
But I would always be scared to burn something in case I like angered something or...
Yeah.
But I also don't mess about with things like Ouija boards and...
Yeah.
I would probably just sell the doll.
Somebody else.
Or just give it to a charity shop and be like, ooh.
Well, have you seen any of the Annabelle films? That's what they did with the Annabelle doll.
Yeah.
They just put it in a charity shop.
Well, thank you for bringing along your spooky stories.
Oh, that's all right. And if anyone listening has any spooky stories they would like to send in, we can keep you anonymous. Just email us at truecrimecovenpod@gmail.com.
You can find us on Twitter at truecrimecoven.
You can also find us on Instagram at truecrimecovenpod.
Thanks for listening, and as always, stay spooky!